Michael Mann is a very curious director who once gave us a shootout that is still considered the best in Hollywood history. Many directors have tried to copy Michael Mann's style. The closest was Christopher Nolan, who repeatedly declared his love for Mann, but closest in this case means something like Way to the Moon. Time does not spare anyone, and if in the 90s every new Michael Mann's film was in list of best, then in the noughties the situation has changed and the director basically drowned in self-repeat attempts. Trying to biographical film in 2001, Mann failed miserably and decided to return to the criminal path, which once made him famous. Released in 2004, The Collateral with Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx restored faith in the director. It was the box office success of this film that forced Universal Studios to invest $90 million in a new movie from the director, which along the way turned from just an expensive action movie into the most expensive action movie in the history of Hollywood. In 1984, the Michael Mann series Miami Vice got off to a triumphant start on American television. Success was so impressive that played one of the two major roles in the project. Don Johnson in 1986 became the highest-paid actor on television. For one episode, that kid got $250,000 and for the entire season, more than $6 million. For comparison, in those years, Tom Cruise got $2 million for his role, Harrison Ford, former superstar, took $5 million, and Kevin Costner did his work for food. In the United States, it's one of the iconic series in the history of television. Along with Friends, Detective Magnum, Star Trek and Baywatch. And it was the biggest influence on the whole trendy 80s style. Michael Mann wanted to turn his TV series into a full-length movie back in the early 90s, but Don Johnson want to film, and the money to produce it was huge, so Mann put off the Miami Vice far away and became involved in other projects. He returned to full-length Miami Vice in 2004 on the set of The Collateral. Working well on the set with Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx, Michael Mann offered them the lead role in Miami Vice. Both responded by saying yes. Guys quickly signed contracts and began working with Mann on the script for the next movie. However, after a few months, Tom Cruise dropped out of the project because of start of development of third part of the Mission Impossible, for which he received a lot more money. Jamie Foxx stayed, which led to very unfortunate consequences in the future. The departure of Tom Cruise had little effect on the budget of the future movie. Universal Studio did not reduce the budget, rightly thinking that even if fees in theaters will not be the most excellent, the film will recoup the investment in the future on DVD. Mann's films never became big hits in cinemas, but they have success on video, once they started to gain a cult status. The studio was counting on something similar here. Moreover, the film was based on the cult series. Probably, if the director of the film had not been Michael Mann, the studio could easily reduce the budget by a third, and the quality of the film would not have suffered. But in Mann's case it was not possible. Some directors have a peculiarity to spend a lot of money on films which you don't see this money on the screen. Brian De Palma has Snake Eyes, in which Nicolas Cage successfully runs. The budget for this movie is $73 million. Nicolas Cage runs the whole movie through 3 corridors. That is the movie's face-off, The Rock or Con Air, which is exactly the same running Cage, similar budget, but they look 5 times more expensive. But it's not because Brian De Palma is stealing money from his movies. It's because of the way he shoots. The Snake Eyes could have been filmed in the 3 corridors where Nicolas Cage runs in the studio pavilions instead of in Atlantic City. They could have shot the boxing match in the studios, too, seating 50 people so that when it was shown it looked like the hall was full. But as De Palma usually does, he filmed everything on location, negotiated with the mayor, rented whole buildings, forced all the citizens working there outdoors, and brought a lot of equipment into these halls. All of this costs many times more. The same thing happens in Mann films. In Con Air, the authors filmed the interior of the plane at the studio in a pavilion. Michael Mann filmed real planes in the Miami Vice, which there are several at once, brought cameras to the actual planes. And since special effects are the choice of losers, these planes also took off with the director and actors. Because people can see out of the window chroma key and everything must be realistic. That's why some Die Hard Part 4 coming out next to the Miami Vice with a car chases, a giant Bruce Willis fee. Only cost $110 million. And Michael Mann would end up shooting Miami Vice for $160 million. Where there is no Bruce Willis. This is not a criticism of the path of these directors. All of these films are shot on real location and you can see it right away. And the picture is richer. The sounds are recorded, they're more realistic. The lighting is real. As long as these directors' films make money, the studios turn a blind eye to their wastefulness. But when they fail, they are hit harder. Because for the studio losses are much higher. This digression is to make it clear that such directors are not an independent branch of con artists like the franchise picture. It's just that these directors don't like studio pavilions. In the end, Tom Cruise, who had run away to earn money, forced Michael Mann to quickly sign Colin Farrell as his replacement. At the time Farrell was a rising star, his participation was immediately approved by the studio. Since he cost less than Cruise and the studio didn't cut the budget, hands pretty rubbed and Michael Mann. The problem with the picture began before the shooting. And these problems were organized by Jamie Foxx. When he signed on to participate in the film in 2004, along with Tom Cruise, Foxx was already quite a famous actor, but was still very little known. However, in the spring of 2005 there was an Oscar ceremony at which Jamie Foxx received this award. Oscar as Best Actor for his role in the movie Ray. After this nuance, Jamie Foxx claimed an increase his check, which should now exceed the Colin Farrell's fee. Instead of $3 million, Jamie Foxx wanted $10 million. Lose the actor before start filming, when millions of dollars had been spent on training and rental locations was not possible. But the shooting was still under threat of failure. For the studio agreed to raise the budget for the tape to $95 million and it did not allow to pay the required $10 million to Fox. In the end, the Colin Farrell's fee was reduced and Colin's $2 million went into the Jamie Foxx pocket. But that was just the beginning. A couple of weeks after, at the start of filming, Fox refused to participate in the scenes that were filmed in planes and boats. All of this led to Michael Mann having to hastily rewrite the script on the fly, and the change in filming locations immediately led to an increase in the film's budget. The filming of Miami Vice took place all over the Caribbean islands and in South America. In order to save money, the entire crew, along with Farrell and Michael Mann, flew on commercial flights, and Jamie Foxx refused to fly them, and the studio had for him and his large entourage allocated a private plane. And although the budget picture has already passed the mark of $110 million, the main blow to the film? Jamie Foxx struck in the middle of the road. During filming in the Dominican Republic, shots rang out not far from the set. Hearing them, Jamie Foxx quickly gathered his entourage and flew to U.S., refusing to shoot anywhere but the United States. Jamie Foxx says the situation was far more serious than the press had made it out to be. Bullets were whizzing over his head, so he had to really fight for his life hiding behind the covers shooting back. How many hooligans he shot in the shootout is not specified. Lest anyone think that Jamie Foxx was afraid of some fireworks, it should be clarified that in the Dominican Republic the film crew was guarded by police, and in some areas where Mann decided to shoot his movie, he had to deal with various gangs, who were also paid for security. If the quirks of Jamie Foxx used to increase the budget slowly, the trick with the disappearance, which he pulled, the Miami Vice have already simply destroyed. Fox's refusal to shoot outside the USA forced a complete change in the script for the last third of the picture. It is argued that the original finale of Miami Vice should have been filmed in Paraguay. It was much bigger, more dramatic than what had to be filmed in a hurry in Miami. Entire storylines were affected and had to be removed from the film. They no longer made any sense. The crew hated Jamie Foxx. According to their stories, Foxx was always coming to the set very late. Went with his whole entourage. Because of this feature of his, he quickly earned the nickname Primadonna. Since we had to shoot in Miami during hurricane season, on one of the filming days near truck in which Farrell and Fox were sitting, glass fell from one of the skyscrapers. After that, Fox refused to shoot in the wind and rain. Farrell, unlike Fox, all praise, and this despite the fact that while working on the film did not dry out. And at the end of each day, he could be found lying under the door of his trailer. But during all the filming, he never came late and did everything that was required of him. Later Farrell will regret his behavior and blame himself for the failure of the film. According to him, he was not fully given to work, and for this he is very ashamed. It was after the police in Miami Farrell went to the clinic, after which he practically quit drinking. Blamed for what happened the film and Michael Mann. People who worked on the film claim that Mann rewrote the script several times a day, and often the changes made were terrible. But because the director was influential in those years, everyone was simply afraid to point out the problems to him. Mann himself would agree with all the criticism in later interviews and wished he had a studio overseer on the set. He often forgot himself, and instead of reacting quickly to problems he bought up pirated cassettes of his films in Paraguay and rejoiced like a child. By the end of the filming process, Miami Vice came up with a budget of $140 million. According to unofficial reports, which were trumpeted before the release of publications like Deadline and The Hollywood Reporter, the budget of the picture went well over the mark of $160 million. These days, Fast and Furious has already beaten these figures, but in 2006 the Miami Vice became the most expensive movie in history. Naturally, all the problems of the tape were covered in the press. The audience was scared of the critics, and the failure in cinemas for anyone was not a surprise. At the box office, Miami Vice has only $153 million. Studio Universal lost on the production of Miami Vice from $100 to $150 million. Since the picture has problems, any person who decided to get acquainted with it, about any positive tale on the media, which so hoped the studio here, and it is not. Michael Mann himself never openly criticized Jamie Foxx. According to the director, Jamie is a great actor, and everyone has his own cockroaches in his head. Colin Farrell, on the other hand, believes that one of the problems with the Miami Vice is the wrong accents. When he signed on for the project, he thought the movie would be like Lethal Weapon. There was humor in the original script, but over time it all went away and it turned out to be what it was. Jamie Foxx, by the way, was never paid a similar fee to appear in a film. Michael Mann's career in 3 years after the Miami Vice finished the failure of the film Public Enemies. After him for 11 years, Mann has directed only one film, Blackhat, which also failed. Now Michael Mann are trying to get a prequel of his most famous film, The Heat, into the works. Thanks for listening. Subscribe and stay tuned.